On a film set in Beijing, under the soft weight of a summer afternoon, nothing extraordinary was supposed to happen. Cameras were rolling, schedules were tight, and everyone was focused on their roles. Yet sometimes, the moments that stay with us longest are not written into a script. They arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, and leave behind an emotional echo that lingers far beyond the day itself. That was exactly the kind of moment that unfolded when a familiar figure stepped onto the set, not with noise or announcement, but with calm purpose. No headlines were prepared, no attention was demanded. And still, in that single, unguarded instant, the atmosphere shifted. People paused, conversation softened, even the rhythm of work seemed to slow. It felt as if time itself had chosen to watch. What followed was not a dramatic revelation, nor a spectacle meant for public display, but something far rarer in today's entertainment world. A genuine human connection, visible only to those paying close attention. And it is precisely because of that quiet authenticity that this moment has captured hearts across continents, reminding us why we are still drawn to stories that feel real. She did not arrive as a star, but as a presence. Dressed simply, moving carefully, her appearance carried a natural warmth that needed no explanation. There was no attempt to command attention, yet attention found her all the same. Those nearby noticed, first not her fame, but the calm strength she carried, the unmistakable sign of new life, and the grace with which she held herself. She took a seat offered by the crew, thanked them softly, and settled into the background as though that was exactly where she wished to be. This was not a visit staged for cameras or designed to send a message. It was an act of quiet support, one person showing up for another in the most human way possible. In an industry often defined by noise and constant visibility, that choice alone spoke volumes. Across the set, he was immersed in his work, surrounded by lights, scripts, and the familiar pressure of performance. He had been discussing scenes, exchanging thoughts with senior colleagues, fully present in his professional role. Then, almost instinctively, his attention shifted. There was no dramatic reaction, no sudden movement. Instead, his posture softened, his expression changed, and something in his eyes settled into a gentler focus. Those who noticed described it as a moment of recognition, the kind that does not require words. It was not surprise that crossed his face, but something deeper, reassurance, affection, and a sense of grounding. In that glance, the boundary between actor and individual seemed to dissolve, revealing a man momentarily anchored by someone who mattered beyond the frame. What made this moment so compelling was not what happened, but what did not. There was no embrace designed for effect, no lingering gesture meant to be remembered by strangers. A brief touch of hands, a shared look, and then space was respected. The simplicity of it all created a powerful contrast to the expectations often placed on public figures. Here was intimacy without exhibition, connection without declaration. For many watching from afar through whispered accounts and short clips, it felt almost intrusive to observe, and yet deeply moving to know it existed. The absence of performance became the performance itself. The crew felt it too. Work continued, but with a different energy. Conversations grew lighter. Laughter came more easily. Even seasoned professionals, accustomed to separating emotion from task, found themselves smiling without quite knowing why. Some later described the atmosphere as unusually peaceful, as if the set had briefly become a shared living space rather than a workplace. She remained mostly seated, watching quietly, occasionally exchanging a few words with those nearby. There was no effort to be included, and yet she belonged there completely. her presence was not about participation, but about witnessing, about being there without interfering. That restraint carried its own kind of strength. In many ways, this moment resonated because it reflected something audiences rarely see but deeply recognize. Across cultures, across ages, people understand the language of care expressed through silence. They understand what it means to show up without asking for acknowledgement, to support without needing credit. For younger viewers, it may have looked like a glimpse of an ideal partnership built on mutual respect. For older audiences, it might have echoed experiences from their own lives, moments when love was expressed not through grand gestures, but through patience and presence. This universality allowed the story to travel far beyond its original setting, reaching people who may never have followed the careers involved, yet still felt touched by the emotion conveyed. There is also a deeper context that gives this scene its weight. Public life often demands constant explanation. Silence is interpreted as secrecy, privacy as avoidance. And yet here, silence felt honest. Nothing was confirmed, nothing denied. The moment was allowed to exist on its own terms. That openness invited reflection rather than judgment. Instead of being told what to think or feel, audiences were trusted to observe and interpret for themselves. In a digital landscape driven by instant conclusions, that trust is refreshing. It creates space for empathy rather than speculation, and for appreciation rather than consumption. The symbolism of new life added another layer, though it was handled with remarkable restraint. Rather than becoming the focus, it remained part of the background, acknowledged without being emphasized. This choice shifted the narrative away from curiosity and towards continuity. It suggested not a single dramatic event, but an ongoing journey, one that unfolds quietly alongside work, responsibility, and everyday routines. That balance between personal growth and professional commitment is something many people strive for, and seeing it represented so gently made the moment feel aspirational rather than distant. As the day drew to a close, there was no grand farewell. Work wrapped up, equipment was set aside, and people began to leave. He approached her, and again there was no performance. A simple gesture, a shared pause, and then they moved on together. Observers later described it as deeply human, almost ordinary, and perhaps that is why it mattered so much. In a world saturated with carefully curated images, ordinariness has become extraordinary. It reminds us that behind every role, every title, there are individuals navigating life with the same hopes, concerns, and quiet joys as everyone else. This is why the story continues to resonate. It is not about status or confirmation. It is about recognizing a moment of sincerity in an environment where sincerity is often questioned. It reassures audiences that authenticity still has a place, that not everything meaningful needs to be shared loudly, and that some connections are strongest when left unspoken. Long after the clips fade and attention moves elsewhere, the feeling remains. A sense of calm, of warmth, and of trust, in the idea that genuine care can exist even under the brightest lights. If stories like this speak to you, if you find yourself drawn to moments that reveal the human side of fame and the quiet strength behind public lives, then this channel was created with you in mind. At LVT-SHOWBIZ, we look beyond the headlines to explore the emotions, choices, and subtle interactions that often go unnoticed, yet say the most. Thank you for spending your time here, for listening, and for allowing these stories to unfold at their own pace. If you would like to continue discovering narratives that value authenticity over noise and depth over spectacle, consider subscribing to the channel and staying with us. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that inspire reflection, connection, and a gentler view of the world behind the spotlight.